1987 was a good time for single lens cameras, 35mm cameras. The market had grown a lot in the early 80s and people were interested in photography, and this was particularly relevant in regard to entry-level cameras. People had bought compact cameras and then the camera manufacturers were very much trying to get people to then buy single lens cameras. Now, Nikon had been quite successful with the FG20, which had followed on from the FG, and in 1987 they decided to launch onto the market this camera, which is a F401. I'm not quite sure why Nikon changed the numbering system, but they did. The F series became quite an established series. They started with numbers in the hundreds and then later they went to things like the F50, F60. But the F401 was quite significant because it was an automatic focusing camera, and we have the lens on here is a 35 to 70 zoom lens, and there's lots of interesting things about this camera. I think the first thing I should mention is that it's quite a different design to the FG20, in particular on the dials here. To load a film, and I've just had a film through this camera successfully, to load the film you just simply insert film here, put it across, close the door, and the film winds on. What I really like about this camera is it's got a window here and it moves. There's a little rotating drum which moves as the film, so we've got a visual indication that the film is moving on. I suspect some of you have sometimes put films in cameras and at the end realise the film hasn't gone through the camera. This is a visual interpretation that we can see that directly. The second thing to note are these, just move the light source slightly, the dials here. We've got one dial for aperture and one for shutter speed, and in order for that to work, what is quite different again about this camera is the lens has to be set at the smallest aperture in order for these functions to work. And this is like a change for Nikon. For things like the FE2, the aperture ring had been really important. Now the aperture ring here is almost defunct in that we have to put it for F22 there, and then on the aperture ring, which is the ring here, we can move, the ring here, we can rotate this to be the aperture that we demand, and then the camera will automatically set the shutter speed. So the first thing is on here, as I've said, we can move the aperture here until we get an aperture we want. As long as the green A is on the other dial, then we are in aperture priority mode. So you set the aperture and the camera automatically decides on a shutter speed according to the amount of light. So it would be something like, if it was a bright sunny day, 5.6 would probably be something like, the camera would select something like 250th of a second, and if we then went to F8 it would halve that. So that is the aperture priority here. Now we then change that to S. On shutter priority, we can then on the other rotating ring decide on the shutter speed, and the camera will automatically decide an aperture for us, whatever is appropriate. And then, so we've got aperture priority, shutter priority, and then finally, if we have A and S set at the same time, it then goes on a program mode and will automatically do whatever it thinks best for us. So that was quite novel for Nikon, and if you think about it, you have to unlock the dials here, but on a modern especially a Nikon, we've got rotating dials front and back. We have here, this is the first time these rotating dials were, I think, really seen in a camera. We've got automatic and manual focusing control there. We've got a little control so we can get the lens off the camera. The AE exposure lock is this button here. It's a bit confusing because it's by the AF, so we might easily think it's a focusing lock. It's not. It's, I believe, the exposure lock. It's a moderately ergonomic camera, something I really like about this camera, and please excuse my excitement in this, but one of the right pains with a lot of cameras, especially the later film cameras, is they take expensive batteries. Not for this Nikon. We've got 4. If we open the back here, the bottom here, it takes 4 AAs. So that's one of the easiest batteries to get hold of. The AA battery, it takes 4 of them. And there's not a lot more to say. Apart from, what is it like to use? It's very sharp. Well, this is a fairly good lens. It's easy to use. As I said, it's a bit of a point and shoot to use. A manual, I was surprised with how flexible it actually was. But compared to the F70 and the F90, which, okay, are more sophisticated cameras, there's a lack of viewfinder information. You don't know, okay, you can see on the top what aperture and shutter speed, but this is not shown in the viewfinder. Plus, we've got no easy way of depth of field preview. You can't set the diaphragm so you can see your depth of field. You can't do that on here. So it is a camera with some limiting powers. However, it's a camera which is often to be found quite reasonably priced. You can pick them up quite cheaply. Unfortunately, quite often they are missing the lenses because the lenses are often worth more than the camera. I think it's quite an important camera in terms of design and how camera design was evolving. It's not my favourite Nikon by any means, but it's an easy to use camera, produces good results. They seem to last quite well as well. So if you find one, why not put a film in and have a go with one? Bye for now.